Hello, welcome back. So today we're going to be doing something a little bit different, which is that I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to be making today. So to rewind a little bit, earlier today I was at my full-time job, which I work at a children's museum, and today part of my day included doing a kind of drop-in program, and I created this whole sensory bin. Most of the kids that I work with are about ages 5 and under. And this bin that I had made had all these different containers in it. In my classroom, I have this old tea set. So I had all these little tea set pieces with flour and salt and water and paint and flower petals and all these different scoops and mixing bowls. And it was just meant for the kids to kind of come up to the table and pour and scoop and dump and mix. And it was so fabulously messy. They had so much fun. It was exactly what I had hoped it would be. But watching the kids come up and interact with it and just being so kind of carefree in that mess has kind of inspired me today. I love doing process art with the kids that I teach. So for people who may not regularly practice art or practice process art is essentially where you're only focused on the artistic process and you are not really going in with a vision of a product. It's not something you're trying to create. Sometimes during the process, you might make different decisions to kind of influence how it's looking or how you feel about it, but it's really when you're going in and you're not trying to just create one specific thing, you're there to really explore the whole process or technique that you're going through. So I am planning on doing some process art today. I have these two little canvas tiles. I think I'm going to work on them simultaneously, and I think that I want to use the same color scheme on both so that they kind of form a cohesive set. But right now I have in front of me some watercolors, a pretty big assortment of acrylic paints, and then some seashells of differing shapes. So one of the big techniques that I use with kids is exploring texture through doing stamping and printing. So dipping something in paint and then stamping it on paper or any other surface, or rolling it around, just kind of exploring those different shapes and the different kinds of patterns they can produce. So I might do some printing on the canvases with these seashells. But yeah, I'm just going to kind of get started and see where this goes. I'm probably going to talk through a lot of it about why I'm making certain decisions or what I'm thinking, but if I'm ever really lost in the zone and silent, I'll just time lapse through it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, welcome to Table View, Maddie. So this is the space I'm working with. I have my canvas tiles on some cardboard, which in turn is on some newspaper print, so that hopefully I don't mar my desk too badly if I get a little messy. But I've got some water for my paints. I have acrylics off to the side over here. Got my seashells, my collection of brushes. So I think I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. I'm wanting to kind of start with maybe a basic watercolor wash. I'm just gonna go ahead and get these tiles a little wet. Oh, I can see this brush had a little bit of yellow on it, or maybe my water cup did. That's fine. So these canvas tiles are kind of interesting in that they don't really love to take to watercolor. I've attempted to watercolor on these before, and I know that these tiles can be a little bit hydrophobic, so sometimes the color just kind of beads up on it, which makes it really hard to get a uniform color, but that's okay because I really just want this to be a lot about texture. I have a lot of color options. I'm kind of feeling drawn towards this deep blue. I'm gonna go ahead and start with some of that. Just kind of splotch it around. The other thing about this is that typically in either watercolor or acrylic painting, you would do some painting and then wait for some layers to dry before adding over it. I'm not going to be doing that. I'm just kind of going to keep going. So at certain points, I'm sure these paints are not going to do what I expect them to do. I've never really tried to do like acrylic paints over wet watercolor, but we're going to explore that today and see what happens. They might dry quicker than I think, just because it's on canvas instead of paper, but we'll see. All right, I think I'm gonna go in with, what is this color? I think this is like a deep indigo color. Definitely gonna go in with some of that. It's actually not as rich of a color as I was hoping it would be. Get a few swirls of that in there. Maybe one more over here. We got some bubbles in there. I feel like I need kind of a contrasting color. Not sure exactly in which direction I want to go. I think maybe I'll actually go for this bright pink. There is something very kind of freeing about making art without any expectation. And it's just something that I've been feeling a lot of lately, because in my work, I create art so freely with the kids that I teach. I get messy and we explore movement and texture and all of these different artistic elements. And it's so fun and playful. But then I come home and I tend to overthink my own art to a bit of an extreme. And so today I'm just hoping to play around a little bit and just have a lot of fun making art. I don't want it to feel like a chore, because when I'm making art at work with the kids, I never feel burdened by it. I never feel like it's a chore. And I want my own art practice to be just as fun to me. I'm going in with a lighter blue and creating these little dots. Okay. I have some white watercolor on here that I've never used before. We're gonna give it a try. Sorry, I did not like that sound. Yeah, no, I don't really love that. White watercolor can be really cool, but I prefer it if it's a little bit more opaque, like a gouache sort of texture. Okay. All right, we've got some watercolor layers down. Move these up. I think I'm gonna go ahead and do some seashell printing, and for that I want a thicker acrylic paint. I don't know what color I want to use, so I'm just gonna start putting some colors down. I just have these little bottles of craft paint for now. They're kind of cheap, and that's what I wanted them to be. Got some purple, some blue. Oh, that was really watery. shake it up and try that again. There we go. Some blue. I have this darker blue. I think I'm gonna have to open. Don't think I've used this one yet. Oh no. Oh, I see the top has a cover on it. Add some of that in there. I'm trying to get good coverage in my little dish here, but at the same time, I'm trying not to pour out too much paint because I don't want it to go to waste. I have some pink on here. I think maybe I'll go ahead and mirror that. I have a couple of pink options. I think I'll go for magenta. I want these really rich colors. And then the last one I'm gonna do is I have a metallic gold that I think will just be really fun. These are a lot messier than the paints I use at work. At work, we just use washable tempera paint, which I've definitely thought about getting some just washable tempera to have here in my own studio, because it might help me be a little bit more free about it. Ooh, interesting. Definitely does not show up the same way because these tiles are wet right now. It's getting really soaked. I don't mind that. I see now why it might have been more beneficial for me to wait until this dried a little more. But I'm undeterred. Oh, dropped it. That's part of the process now. Oh, I like the way that one worked. Just kind of rolling it. Leaving trails in the watercolor. I'm fascinated by this. I have no idea how it's going to dry. That's part of the fun. As part of my work, I do occasionally teach workshops for adults, and I know that something like this would be very stressful for a lot of the adults that I tend to get in workshops. I did a watercolor workshop back in February maybe, and lots of them were very stressed by not knowing what exactly was going to happen in the artwork, the unpredictability of it. That's one way I can make a mark. And just do these big globs of paint. I'm not sure if these seashells will wash clean without the paint leaving like a stain mark on them, but it's not really something I'm worried about. if they get stained, I'll just take them to work and do the exact same thing there. I want to try this one. I'm sure I could get a much more nuanced print off of this one if I wasn't insisting on doing this art before the canvas dries. If I was willing to do multiple layers, I'm sure it would be a much more interesting print for this specific seashell, but again, it's not what we're after today. I had a wonderful and terrible idea, which is that I could scoop the paint and then pour it. So I'm gonna try it, see if I like that. I do like that. I like how when it kind of expands, it's pushing the watercolor pigment out. I do like that. And this is going to have a three-dimensional texture when it dries because of these big blobs of paint, which I kind of like. Oh, I liked that one. We're getting to sort of an acrylic pour place, which is not the worst place to be. I've never really done like proper pour painting. It looks fun though. Something that I think makes process art like this a little bit more approachable for adults is having kind of a set color palette. For me, I really enjoy working in a limited color palette, which probably isn't surprising. If you've ever seen my old art, I used to pretty exclusively work in black and white. So I do enjoy having some restrictions while I work. For me, it helps me think about the process more instead of worrying about color. And I think for a lot of people, having kind of a limited palette takes away that worry of making everything brown and dull by overmixing. So I really like the way this is shaping up. I like the way the wetness of the watercolor on canvas makes everything move very fluidly. I like that I'm getting messy while I work. I get messy all the time when I do art at my job, but because when I come home and so much of my regular art is just with pens or colored pencil, I don't get messy. And in a weird way, sometimes I almost feel like it's not as creative if it wasn't messy, which isn't true, but I don't know, getting messy while making art makes me feel more childlike. And I think for any adult that's making art, sometimes you kind of want to revert back to that free mindset that you might have had as a child. All right. So my fingertips are wet, and so I'm smearing them around on my hands to make them more dry so I don't immediately stain the next thing I pick up. Again, something I do all the time at work. All right, I'm really happy with how these are looking so far. And I think what I want to do is just take a little bit of gold paint on my fingers and kind of smudge it around the edges. Now, will that do what I want it to do? I'm not sure, but we're gonna try it. I don't wanna dirty up my other palette. I'm just gonna pour some extra gold paint in this one. I do wanna try and keep these somewhat level because I don't want these gorgeous globs of paint to just slide right off. And it's okay with me if some of the gold is visible from the top. In fact, I like it that way. Just kind of going around these edges. Like that. There we go, on to the next. I think as artists, it is so important not to get kind of too caught up in your own specific style or technique that you lose the ability to just play. I think for me, and maybe this is partly just because of my line of work, but I create some of my best art when I'm in a flow state where you're kind of not so aware of the outside world, you're just kind of lost in what you're doing. And for me, getting really playful is one of the easiest ways for me to reach flow. And lately, I've been in a really overthinking mode with my art and feeling that kind of need to get into flow. And I feel like this was the perfect way for me to do that. So I am thoroughly messy. I've made some questionable art. I have lots of things to wash up. But I really, really enjoyed playing around and having some fun. So I know this was kind of an unconventional video from me, but I hope it was enjoyable, hope it was fun. I'm gonna let these dry. By the time this video is posted, I will take a picture of these once they're dry and I'll post them on my Instagram. So feel free to take a look over there. The link will be in my description. Feel free to check out how they dried if you're curious. I'm gonna zoom you in for like one last closer look. Here's how they're looking. Those erased paint spots are still super glossy because they're wet. I know as they dry down, they're gonna look pretty different, but that's how we're looking so far. But thank you so much for joining me today. It's time for me to go ahead and wash up and do a little bit of cleaning. But again, I had so much fun filming this one. I hope it was an enjoyable watch, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!